All right, so now let's get into tables. Hopefully this is still fairly familiar territory for all you guys. Here's our workbook application. And you can see that our workbook application is sort of broken down into a grid. Is this an unfamiliar way that things are broken down on the web? No. In fact, it's pretty much all broken down this way. In fact, not pretty much. It is all broken down this way. How about in operating systems? Is everything broken down into a grid in operating systems? Pretty much. Right? Someone right back at the beginning said things are going to be in rectangles. And we're going to put everything in a rectangle. And even some things, like you can see on the iSchool website, it looks like there's kind of this nice arch on there, right? And it's not rectangular, it's all faked. Right? It's all a grid. It's all rectangles stuck on the screen in different places. That's the metaphor. That's the way we've decided. We're a rectangular culture, I think. Right? And all of our information fits into little rectangles on the screen. The screen itself is a rectangle. Right? So grids are really important. Here's what the grid looks like in our workbook application. We have this rectangle up here. This is old territory called the banner area. This rectangle over here called the global nav. There's the local nav rectangle and the content area rectangle. That's a grid. That's a layout. That's the way this is all positioned. And in this case, I put rectangles on here, but that's not really the way that we construct. Well, actually, in this case, it is the way it's constructed. But I want to show you a different notion of how grids are constructed. So let's look at this thing. This is just a random page, European Youth Week. And we're going to look at the grid here. There's grid number 1. Can you see how that's divided into 1, 2, 3 parts? What would we call those 3 parts? 3 parts? Nah. 3 areas? Nah. 3 columns, right? 1, 2, 3 columns. Or you might call them 3 cells. Cell 1, cell 2, cell 3. Right? We're working towards tables here. Is that the only grid on this page? There's all sorts of grids on the page. Some of them are just inside the tag. Like, for example, this is probably a paragraph tag here, and that paragraph tag creates its own little rectangle. Right? There's the rectangle of the paragraph tag. In fact, any block tag, it's another way of thinking of the block tags, are the rectangles. They're the rectangles that have borders, margins, padding, etc. that are on the screen. So there's a teeny little one. We're not going to talk about ones that are at that level, but we will talk about some that are at higher levels. For example, here's a grid. Right? It's a grid. It has this piece and it has that piece. And you can see they're lined up. And in grids, we care about things like what's the difference between the size of this one and the size of this one. We care about alignment. So is this left aligned to the grid? Is it right aligned to the grid? Is it top aligned? Is it middle aligned? We care about all those alignments. We care about borders. We care about margins. We care about something called padding. Right? All of those things are the words that have to do with gridness. Because if you're in a grid, you're in a block. If you're in a block, you have surrounds. If you have a surround, that surround could have color, and that's a margin. Or a border, sorry. It can have space between the color and the rest of the world. That's a margin. It can have space between the color and the content. That's called padding. Right? All those words that describe how the block is to be constructed. Also, they have alignments. Are they aligned to the right? Are they aligned to the left? Are they aligned to the top? Are they aligned to the middle? Are they aligned to the bottom? All sorts of vocabulary for describing how those grids are laid out. Okay, there's yet another grid. Now I have a grid. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, cells. And each of those cells, again, has a certain layout to it, has a certain way that it is not only internally represented, but represented with respect to the rest of the page. Okay, so the entire layout idea is based on grids.